Ukrainian armed forces strike a concert for Russian soldiers with a HIMARS and cause heavy casualties, while the weather prevents heavy fighting or intense movement on the front line. But still, some movement happens, and most of it is in favor of the Russians. But more about this in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Hello and welcome. Heavy fighting is currently happening inside of Ukraine, but it's hindered by the weather. There is snow, there's rain, fog, low-hanging clouds are making it difficult. And times there is heavy wind that prevents the usage of drones both through the fog and through the wind, and everything that isn't on paved roads is in danger of getting stuck in the mud, as while the temperature goes below zero already and the freezing starts, first snow is falling. It hasn't frozen the ground yet, so we are still at the end of the Rasputitsa. Both sides strike each other through the air. The Russians mostly use drones for it, the Shahid. Ukraine uses drones themselves. They have struck in Rostov, in Kursk, and in Bryansk. In those three oblasts, there are reported attacks by the Ukrainians. I cannot confirm that they have been successful in any regard. North of the Seversky Donetsk, along the front line here, fighting is also continuing. We only have one change, and Ukrainians managed to recapture a small area here in the Serebryansk forest, not of big importance, but still a success. South of the Seversky Donetsk, it's different. The Russians have success north of Klishivka. They advance here and here in the forested area and manage to push themselves forward. The same is next to Andrivka. There they've thrown the Ukrainians back over the other side, back over the railroad track that's here. They've thrown them back over it. So in this area, the initiative seems to be on the Russian side as well. We also have a lot of fighting here at other points, but no change in territory and no point in extending the situation report just so you can listen to me pronouncing Ukrainian names wrongly. Further south at Avdiivka, Russians keeping up their pressure from Krasnohorivka, mostly to the north and northwest. They managed to advance in this area here. They have some success, especially along the tree lines here, advancing forward. There was a Ukrainian counterattack in the area between the coke plant and Stepove. Supposedly, according to reports, it had some success pushing the Russians somewhat back, but no bigger breakthrough, and the Russians seemingly are still on the western side of the railroad track here as well. In those attacks, the 47th Mechanized Brigade from the Ukrainians was used. That includes Leopard 2A6, and there are fresh pictures and videos showing them in the area, so we have confirmation of this equipment being used there now. South of Avdiivka, or let's say southeast, there was a Ukrainian counterattack into the industrialized area. It was not successful, whereas the Russians managed to gain roughly that piece here and advance somewhat further. There's also a claim that the Russians managed to advance in this direction here. I have not seen any proof of this yet. While it's possible, there is no proof yet, so I can't confirm that. Further south at Marinka, we have a significant success by the Russians. They more or less captured that area here. Another step towards the total capture of Marinka that is under siege, or where the Russians and the Ukrainians fight over it since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. We see that the rest of the city that is still under Ukrainian control gets smaller by the day, but regarding the current progress, the past speed, it's probably going to hold out for a few more months, or at least a few more weeks. I wouldn't expect it to fall anytime really soon. But still, Russian advances continue. We have the same further south at Novomikhailivka. The Russians advanced more or less everything north here. They pushed several hundred meters in the direction of Novomikhailivka and are advancing from it from the south now, as well as from the east, and increasing their pressure towards the town. I have no significant changes from Vuhledar, from the oblast border south of Velika Novosilka, nothing from the Orekhiv area, so we'll just skip that because nothing much to say there. The one area where it's getting where we do have some changes again is here along the Dnipro. The Russians themselves, a Russian military blogger, confirms that the Ukrainians managed to advance into the forested area at Krinky and somewhat along the river in the direction of Kosachi-Laheri. Probably not too far, 100, 200 meters or something like this, but no big change. We do have a geolocalization of Russians though, and it's up here. This is here next to the end of the forested area, so more or less here. They are on the move and and a hand grenade is dropped on them through a drone. I've seen other maps that consider all of this here gray area or contested area, and we see that there is Russian presence in it, at least in between. But as those soldiers were on the move and not in a position, we cannot we cannot take this area to be under Russian control. But at least we do know that the Russians have advanced up until here in this video. Further west, they are still fighting towards Poima, Pishanivka, and Pitstepne. And while I cannot confirm any change here, the interesting thing is that the Russian military blogger Wargonzo is emphasizing the strength of the Ukrainian artillery here. So it seems to be a particularly strong artillery fire on the Russian positions here, even though it didn't lead to any successes. Overall, we have, the overall situation, we have one big event, and that was a strike on Starobesheve, which is here. This is 45 to 50 kilometers away from the front line here, and the Russians were having a concert there for naval infantry. Because of a holiday of the armed forces. I think it was for the Air Force and Space Forces. And in that, there was a concert where an actor or a Russian actress was playing. And this is actually the video from that very concert where we see the strike happening. No blood, no gore, so don't worry. But this is some survivor apparently published that video. The strike killed that actress. Her name is Polina Menschich, and it supposedly killed 25 soldiers and wounded 100 more. Again, within striking range of the opponent, the Russians did a mass gathering, probably even announced it. We've had those again and again, but from both sides. Just recently, the mountain brigade had one of the Ukrainian mountain brigades, I've forgotten the number, I think 86 or something, I'm not sure, had somewhere here a meeting, an award ceremony where they were struck by an Iskander ballistic missile. This happens both sides again and again. They still make the mistakes of gathering and then being struck in close while in range of the enemy armed forces. From the Crimean Peninsula or the Black Sea, we have news that the Russians reported 4 USV being destroyed, so autonomous boats, kamikaze boats they have destroyed. And we have some news about the fourth generation. The Russians have received a new batch of Sukhoi 34. Those are the fighter bombers that the Russians are using. Since the beginning of the war, they have already received 22 new Sukhoi 34. This is confirmed by open source intelligence. But we also have news that the Russians have started, the two majors are reporting that they started setting up a Russian Africa Corps to recruit volunteers to do basically Wagner's job in Africa from now on, as Wagner is being taken over by the Ministry of Defense. Now the Russians still have shown no intent to give up their operations in Africa. They've started recruiting personnel specifically for that. The Russian Defense Minister Shoigu said that the Russian defense industry has produced 4.9 times as many missiles and artillery, 3 times as many armored weapons. That I would understand this should mean tanks, IFVs, APCs, that they have produced 16 times as many drones since the beginning of 2022. Overall, supplies have increased by a factor of 12 and long-distance missiles by a factor of 5. Now, obviously, there is no way of proving him being completely wrong, but we do know that they have significantly increased their output. Even the Ukrainian GUR, the military intelligence, says that they significantly increased the number of cruise missiles they are producing monthly now. But then again, they are at least according to the GUR, they are nowhere close to 5 times. But we do know that they have longer shifts and that they work several shifts now in armament factories, which should lead to visibly and significantly higher output. While the output is higher, export isn't. There's reports that in the Dubai Defense Expo, the Russians were displaying 250 items and they weren't able to sign up for a single sales contract. This is probably due to the fact that there is embargoes and sanctions. So can you even pay for that? And are the US or the European Union going to sanction you in case you buy something from them? Another factor might be that even if you are willing to take both of this, the delivery might take a long time because Russia needs a lot of what it's currently producing itself. The capacity to actually still export at the same time should be visibly limited, but at least in this case they didn't make a single sale. Supposedly in past expos they were signing contracts for 10 to 15 billion, so the difference is really quite stark. Troop recruitment also leads to cases like this. This is a former Wagner fighter, a Satanist, and jailed for ritual murder was released. There are other reports that supposedly he beheaded several teenagers and ate them. He's a cannibal as well, that is being released. Obviously, a result of recruiting hardcore criminals in prison and then pardoning them. And he is now back on the streets in Russia as he survived the use as cannon fodder inside of Ukraine. In the political sphere, we have some news from the Finnish-Russian border. The Russians have started pushing migrants towards the Finnish border and thus the European Union. Finland has started to build improvised barriers and closing its borders. There are some videos claiming that it shows migrants walking towards the border and receiving bicycles from government officials inside of Russia. I cannot really confirm this, and I'm not really sure what the bicycles are supposed to mean, but this was at least supposedly this is happening right now. We had that a while ago with Belarus and Poland, where the same thing happened, that the Lukashenko government pushed migrants from Yemen, from Syria, Sudan, Somalia, etc. towards the European Union. Igor Girkin, also known under his nom de guerre Igor Strelkov, has announced his bid for the presidency of Russia. Igor Girkin is a former military intelligence officer inside of Russia who, according to himself, pushed the button for the war in 2014. He, with 50 others, he led 50 other Russian fighters over the border to start the uprising in eastern Ukraine. So he's directly responsible for what is happening right now. He is sentenced in absentia to prison for the shoot down of a civilian airliner over the area, and he's a ardent ultra-nationalist, but at the same time one of the most vocal critics of what is happening right now, because according to him, Russia doesn't do enough. So he wants Russia to win and thinks that the government is throwing away a potential victory because of their own failures. This made him one of the most interesting sources from the Russian side before he was imprisoned, as he had both military knowledge, connections in the place, and didn't keep his mouth closed when it came to failures towards the Russians. He's now arrested for several months already, I think under insulting the Russian military, basically for criticizing the government and the military for a long time, and now he's running and he doesn't hold back either now. He's saying it's basically like sitting down on a table to play a card game with others who cheat, because he says it's already, the election is already a done deal. Putin is going to win, but he still decides to run. We also have news from Bogdan Yermochin. He's the 17-year-old from Mariupol that I reported to you about a couple of weeks ago in the situation report. He was put into foster care in Russia and was about to be recruited into the Russian army. But the international information about him, the outcry about him led him to now being released and being back in Ukraine. This will obviously prevent him from entering the Russian armed forces, but he will likely be recruited into the Ukrainians. But that seems to have been in his intent anyways, because according to reports, before that, he was arrested while trying to get into Belarus with the intent to then cross from Belarus into Ukraine to return home to his country, obviously, while expecting that he would have to serve in the armed forces. Gallup, the survey institute, has done a survey about confidence in military. It dipped, but it dipped from 80 to 75%, so the majority still sees the military positively. Interesting part is that the dip is mostly among the opposition. We have it here over the past. Those who think the government does right more or less hover at 90%. There's no significant change, but what we do see is that the opposition. In 2016, 72% of the opposition trusted the military, and now it's only 40% anymore. So in the opposition, they die down. The interesting part is, though, the other parts, while the military drops down, judicial system, police, and the financial institutions have the highest trust in the public ever recorded now during the war. Very interesting sign, and probably a sign that the discontent will not lead to Putin's fall anytime soon. International support is coming for Ukraine as well. Germany is delivering 3D printed surveillance drones that are being handed over to Ukraine, while the US has announced another aid package with the value of $100 million, including Stinger, that's shoulder-fired anti-air, HIMARS, one HIMARS system. That's interesting. I have missed that one was destroyed, because one single item would probably be a sign that one HIMARS was actually lost. The Russians obviously already claimed far more HIMARS destroyed than were ever delivered, but at least until now, I have missed that one was actually destroyed. Giving them one seems to be a replacement for a lost one, so that could be a sign of one being lost. The number of systems is actually not the big deal. They have more than enough for the amount of ammo they have, because giving them 100 additional ones doesn't help them very much if they don't get the ammo for that, and that's where currently the shortage lies for Ukraine. So I would guess that one is not to give them more firepower, but rather to replace one. But at least that's my interpretation of that. Also, TOW, the anti-tank guided missiles, are being delivered. Javelin and 84, another anti-tank guided systems. Anti-tank systems. 84 is not guided, obviously. Pistorius, the German defense minister, announced another IRIS-T SLM air defense system, 20,000 155mm grenades, and anti-tank mines. And the Ukrainian defense ministry is saying that another 20 Marder were confirmed. Van Wiesent, which is a mine clearing, and you can read it for yourself. Some unsexy items that don't make headlines, like crypto phones, but that are obviously also needed. Germany is by now for quite a while, and with quite a significant difference to the rest, the second biggest supplier for Ukraine. The Armenian Ministry of Defense has now denied that they intend to hand over weaponry towards Ukraine. This was reported by the Russian military blogger Riba a couple of days ago. I made a short video about it here on this channel in case you have missed it. They claimed that Armenia has agreed to deliver Tochka-U short-range ballistic missiles to Ukraine, and they would have up to 200 of them in inventory. So that would be a massive boost to Ukraine's short-range ballistic capabilities. And the talk was of up to 40 OSA short-range air defense systems as well. Now Armenia has denied. Riba is usually one of those that are a little more trustworthy than the rest of the Russian military bloggers. But then again, in the past, when the Ukrainian counteroffensive happened in Kherson, they claimed last summer, in summer 2022, that the Ukrainian side was using Leopard 2s that they had been spotted there basically a year before they actually appeared along the front line. So I guess this might have been another mistake, another false information, or they are right and the Armenians just don't admit it yet, because we see the shift, the geopolitical shift from Armenia towards away from Russia and towards the West, and asking them to give Ukraine weaponry, which is then replaced by Western weapons, would kind of make sense. But as I said, we'll have to keep an eye on that if that changes. And we have some unpleasant news for Ukraine. ABC News says here that the Ukraine is now receiving 30% less of the ammunition needs because of Israel, despite initial claims that they will continue receiving that. So they have a fairly significant gap now missing in their weapon supply because of this. And as a last thing, we have something in the Second World War. The propaganda was loose lips sink ships, and this is still valid today. We have a Russian volunteer taking selfies for social media and thus showing the Ukrainians that close to a specific landmark, in this case a gas station, there was military activity, and the Ukrainians struck it with artillery and supposedly did significant damage to the Russians there. That's why maybe you shouldn't, in a war zone, take selfies to brag on social media that you're helping the good cause. That's it from me for now. If you like the situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm. Leave your comment what you think about the current developments. Has Russia now the full strategic initiative back? And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.